I mean, what do you say to those that, we, not just in relation to the manifesto commitment, but we made several commitments when it came to COP26 and so on, when it came to moving away from many of these fossil fuels, essentially. So how can fracking be part of the solution to our energy future?
Well, the process towards net zero basically involves going from gas to renewables, but gas is very much at the heart of the energy mix for several decades up until that point. There's nobody really questions that. Gas power stations have been built up everywhere as we've closed down coal. We're not going to be burning more fossil fuels as a result of fracking, but the reality is we won't be getting any gas from Russia for the foreseeable future, possibly for many years. So Europe needs to produce more gas. The UK has the largest shale gas deposits in Europe. We should be doing our bit. Not so much for our own sake, actually, but for the rest of Europe, and in the process, of course, creating jobs and tax revenue.
Looking at the picture overall, however, there were concerns by some groups. Now, some might derive these groups as being not in my backyard campaigners who want to stop any sort of growth or development in the United Kingdom, but they are voters nonetheless who say that the potential for earthquakes is something to be really, truly concerned about when it comes to allowing shale gas exploration in the United Kingdom. Are they right?
Well, this is one of the many myths about fracking. I mean, the so-called earthquakes are so low down the Richter scale that you wouldn't even notice them, They're very similar to the kind of earthquakes you might have had from coal mining years ago. But you do touch on a point there, which is that politically this was pretty much impossible. If you look at public opinion on fracking, there's been such a concerted propaganda campaign against fracking, partially supported by the Russian government, it seems, in some cases, that people have really no understanding of what's going on. I've seen a lot of the arguments against fracking over the course of the last few days, and they're not even coherent. You will hear people say that fracking's totally unviable in the UK, it's never going to happen, even if it were legal, and in the same breath say that this is going to lead to, more fossil fuels being burnt, more gas being produced. The arguments themselves are not coherent. People's beliefs about fracking, about contamination in the water supply and so on, these are essentially myths. If fracking were allowed, it would be done in a safe way. And indeed, I think the Liz Truss plan was for it to be done with the consent of the local neighbourhood. Now, that again may mean that it was never actually going to happen in practice, but I think there would have been some areas where we could be drilling for shale gas. But yeah, it's not going to happen. And it does underline, it's not just this area. It's so many areas of economic growth. There was always a big concern about Liz Truss's agenda is that she hadn't laid out the arguments for these things. And if you haven't got public support in a democracy, of course, you can't do things quite rightly. And so a lot of the things we need to do in this country to generate growth and to get ourselves out of the rut we're in are going to be unpopular, and they are opposed by various vested interest groups who are not always that honest about things, and so you do need to work with the public and lay the groundwork for these policies before you go in and try to do them almost unilaterally.
On that point about arguments, I think, isn't that a key one? Because for many people, the arguments are quite strong. We're threatened with energy insecurity right now, with kind of destabilising powers across the world, weaponising energy. On top of that, it could potentially bring lots of high-skilled, high-paid jobs, industry. That's been a very key element of discussions over the last few years. Why has pro-fracking campaigners failed to win the argument, convince people, when many people would argue the arguments are quite clear and good?
It's a good question. I mean, the case just hasn't been made well enough by supporters of fracking, or probably I would say by the industry. But yeah, you're quite right. If you can't legalise shale gas exploration during the biggest gas shortage and energy crisis in a generation, then what can you do? But you're showing some pictures there of the kind of groups that are arguing against it, and there's just more of them, and they're more vocal than the relatively small number of people who do support this. And also the benefits of fracking are so dispersed, and the number of people who feel angry about it are so concentrated that it's always a bit unbalanced. You know, there are benefits from fracking. There will be jobs created, but there's also this NIMBYism, you know, and it's exactly the same with house building. Everybody knows that house prices are too high. We need to build more houses, but people don't want them. Not in their area. You know, people with existing mortgages do not want to see their house prices go down. So you do have these intractable problems, and it's things that think tanks like ours try and present the other case for. But it is an uphill struggle, I'm afraid.